Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome Valeria, Susana, Soledad, Marcela, Mari, Sergio, Virginia, Pat. There are some people missing. We are going to wait 1 more minute and we will start in a minute. Welcome Joaquín, a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you very much. Can I possibly get the feature of sharing screen? So the moment the people we're waiting for arrive, I just get started. So I should probably say I'm particularly enthusiastic whenever I get connected with Argentina. I'm originally from Argentina. I'm from Patagonia in Puerto Madryn, and well, I've been in Chile for 25 years now, half my life. But I get this funny question asked sometimes, like, "Where do you feel you are from?" And I go like, "What?" I mean, you never forget where you are from, And I have 2 children. One of them is a Chilean. He's a 15-year-old boy, and the other one is an Argentinian. He's 20-something. And they always laugh too, because they have grown up totally bicultural, so to speak. Bicultural. I don't know if that's the case with any of you, but when your children travel back and forth all the time, this happens a lot. So, well.
Well, how nice. I will introduce yourself at first, and then you can start. Well, Joaquín Triandafilide is an English teacher, MA in Applied Linguistics, and neuroeducator. He devotes most of his time to teacher training in brain-friendly approaches and school mentoring programs in Chile and Latin America. A member of Mind, Brain, and Education think tank team from the JALT, Japan Association of Language Teachers, a local promoter of the Brain Awareness Initiative as Dana Foundation partner in Latin America. He has recently launched a diploma in neuroscience and TESOL with the collaboration of Cambridge University Press in Chile. So, well, a pleasure to have you here today for all of us. A pleasure to be sharing this event with Chilean people, of course. Well, all yours.
All right, thank you very much. Anybody from Chile here? No? Okay, yeah. So I'm the only one speaking from this side of the mountains. Well, I'm located in Santiago, where the weather has become really crazy. We are supposed to be in February. It should be a warm, hot day, but it's kind of autumn-like already. I don't know if that's the case where the place where you live. It's really hot there, Pat. Okay, and
from Colombia.
all right.
There are people from Colombia, Buenos Aires, San Martín de los Andes, near you.
Lovely.
Valencia, Puerto Madryn. Well, you are from.
Yes, I'm from Puerto Madryn originally. All right. Well, good to have people from Colombia as well. And so what we intend to do is to share. I want to share my screen now. Let me see. This. I want to share my screen there. Okay. So let me get started somewhere around here. There, you can see my screen, right? From Cabildo, Bahía Blanca. All right, Bariloche. All right. Well, I'll be checking the chat from time to time, so I don't miss the point whenever speaking. I have to confess, this is my first webinar or formal academic activity after my summer break, so I'm a bit dispersed, so to speak. You will excuse if my ideas just go back to the beach and then I return, but I've intended my entire energy.
Be careful about the conference, and I will take care about the chat. Never mind.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right. So, so as I was saying, I will try to. Can you see my screen already? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So let's get started from here. I feel like doing this activity, which I used to do when I did on-site type of activities, in which everybody in the group has to make up like a new name for yourself, okay? So what I'd like you to do is think of a new name, but this should be based on, what you are coming for to this workshop or to this webinar today. You try to express what you are coming for, what your intention, what your expectation is. So, for example, since my expectation is to deliver Educational Neuroscience 101, my new name is Educational Neuroscience 101. Okay? So get ready to do that. Would you please jot down what your new name is in terms of your expectations? Number 2, my current address is, this should be related to what your main job is. If you teach kids, you should be saying something like, my current address is teaching English at elementary school. Okay? And I feel, well, you should say how you feel about this activity. All right, so I'll get started. My new name is Educational Neuroscience 101. My current address is teacher training at university level, and I feel excited about having the possibility to share with you about educational neuroscience myself. All right, who would like to continue?
Well, my name is Pat. Can you speak? You have already written in the chat.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, my new name is Learner. I teach English at different levels and different ages in Cultural Inglesa, a private institute in Rosario. And I also teach drama in English, and I feel very enthusiastic.
Okay, Sergio, what about you, Sergio?
Thank you.
Sure. Well, my name is Learn to Teach. My current address is high school teacher, and I feel eager to learn.
Okay, thank you. What about you, Sole? Yes, you are mute.
Hello, my name is Open Mind. I'm a secondary school teacher, and I feel excited about learning and about starting a new year after the pandemic.
Okay, thank you, great. What about you, Virginia? You are mute?
Yes, there. Can you hear me? Yes?
Yes, perfectly well.
My new name is Enlightenment. That's what I'm looking for. And my current address is high school teaching. And I feel curious about this.
Okay, great. Marcy has no mic and camera today because she has an old computer, but never mind. She wrote in the chat that she's excited today because of this webinar. What about you, Mari? Mari Zambano.
Sorry, I missed the first part because I had some connection problems. So I tried to connect it on the cell phone, and now I can do it on the computer. So I don't really know what you're talking about.
You have to express what your expectation is, but instead of saying my expectation is, just say my new name is, Okay, then
okay.
where you are working through my current address is, and then I feel, well, how you really feel.
Okay. My new name is Eager. My current address is everywhere, and I feel excited.
Okay, great. What about you, Vale? Thank you.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I believe my new name is Bewildered by Neuroscience. My address is Eager, Excited, and what was the other?
The address has to do with what you do, what you currently teach.
Oh, my address.
Teach.
Sorry. My address is secondary school teaching. And what else?
How you feel?
I feel curious. Curious about this new world, about the brain, the human brain, actually.
Okay, great.
Great. Well, my name is Interested. My address is teaching adults and teens mainly, and I feel excited, very excited. Thank you, all of you.
Great. Okay. Well, I feel challenged by some of the adjectives and attitudes that came up during the dynamics, such as feeling bewildered or looking for enlightenment. And several people are curious, like wondering, what is this all about? Everybody talks about this. And of course, it's all a challenge trying to introduce the topic, which is huge. But I'll try to give you hints here and there, and I'll introduce some of the main issues related to education and neuroscience, okay? Well, obviously, the topic includes or has to do with some keywords, and those keywords are the human brain. The human brain is possibly the most complex machine in the universe that science has to approach. When I approached the science that studies the human brain for the first time, that was about probably 12 years ago, I found out that it's still in process. Okay? And I'll probably tell you more when we discuss about some of the bibliography related to the topic, since there is still so much to be discovered about the human brain. It's always in process and there's always new information, okay? The other keyword is neuroscience, which is the science that studies the human brain, okay? And of course, then we have educational neuroscience. Because of the recent revolution that we have been going through, related to the ways to study the brain, okay? The ways to study the brain, it has become a revolution because the machinery and the systems that are used these days to study the brain have given us a lot of new information that has a direct implication on a growing brain, on a learning brain, on a teaching brain, and in general related to whatever activities imply the human behavior. Okay, so when did this revolution start? About 15-20 years ago. Okay, mainly in the English-speaking countries. And this is very much related to whatever happens in the laboratories, okay? For those of us who speak English, we have this advantage. I'm going to suggest different books, different authors today. Some of them are mainly in English, not in Spanish yet. Or some of them may have one book in Spanish and the rest are in English, okay? But there are already a lot of there is already a lot of information about what's going on. Unfortunately, before the scientific study of the brain, there were a lot of theories about how they presume that the brain operates. And that's why today we have to, neuroscience coexists with a lot of myths. Okay? Things that in the past were presumed that the brain worked like that, but it's not necessarily like that. Today, I'm not going to devote time to what we call myths or neuroscientific myths, but there are a lot going on. And actually, there are many scientists who kind of persecute myths, okay? Things like, for example, we use only 10% of our brains, or there are several things that are very popular, like I use one side of the brain but not the other one. Those are myths, because today we know a lot about how the brain operates, and those have been ranked as being not true, okay? So I must say that if you have questions, you should send them to the chat, and probably the moment I get to the second part of the presentation, we can definitely give room for those questions, okay? I know Andrea will be helping there. Something I'd like to quote, this is from a report by the Royal Society in the UK from back 2011. And this is something that one of the heads of the education and neuroscience programs there said. Education is about enhancing learning, and neuroscience is about understanding the mental processes involved in learning. Can you see the overlap? This common ground suggests a future in which educational practice can be transformed by science, just as medical practice was transformed by science about a century ago. And this is interesting. Most of us would not even be surprised at the fact that a medical doctor these days is very much connected to science. Would you be surprised to hear something like that? Not really. Yeah, actually, all this thing about the pandemic, the statistics, and all the phenomenon behind the pandemics and the COVID-19 is very much associating research, science, yes, and the medical practice. Well, we might be surprised to know that if the pandemic had taken place about 100 years ago, medical practice would not have listened to science that much as today, because the two areas were not very much connected. So the belief of all of those of us who are doing education and neuroscience, the hope is that science and education in a few years should become very close together, so that many of us start working, start teaching based on real evidence. Okay? What if they told you tomorrow, these are the 5 things that work best for you to impact the brain of your students? These are the 3 things you should be doing according to research with your own children at home if you want to make the highest impact. Would we start following those? I think we would. Okay? And that would be probably the benefit. And I'm not saying here we should change radically. What I'm saying is probably there are several authors from the 20th century, from the 19th century, or from before that were definitely really intuitive in terms of what they suggested we did. I want to mention authors like John Dewey or Montessori, writers and theorists that have suggested methodologies in the past, and that as we see them through the light of education and neuroscience today, we can confirm many of the things they suggested back in the past. Okay, well, as this presentation is over, I think this material will be available for participants, Andrea, because I've included the link to the entire interview to this specialist here. Okay. Notice some of the. I want to share 4 or 5 things that are language learning related to neuroscience. Okay, and the study of the human brain, so that I start captivating you in your interest towards this area. One of the things that they have discovered in the last 15 years, this is really recent, that the learning of the first language has different channels, different paths in the brain. And not all the skills that we learn are come naturally when we learn. Okay, so one of the areas that educational neuroscience has been studying in depth is the learning of the first language. And apparently, the learning of the first language seems to be a natural process for the human brain, okay? Which does not happen with other species, okay? There are people who love animals, we respect animals, but no matter the effort you make, they won't learn how to speak. They won't learn how to use our sophisticated system of language because of the way the human brain is designed. Another interesting fact, spoken language comes naturally. At one point in life, it will take place. It comes naturally. As far as that brain is near another brain that speaks. Isn't this interesting? This will take place at about, I don't know, 24 months of age. It will happen. It will take place naturally. With some children, it takes a bit longer. With some of them, it happens earlier, but it will naturally take place. There is a design, an internal wiring and connection that will allow that brain to speak as far as there is another human brain speaking nearby. Okay, and this is connected to another issue that I'm going to mention in a couple of minutes. Okay, notice the spoken language seems to be connected to a gene called FOXP2. About 15 years ago, they started some studies with families with severe speech disorders, and what scientists were able to do was isolate a mutated gene, and that gene was identified as the FOXP2. So we can easily imagine that probably in 15, 20 years from now in the future, I mean, we could go directly to this gene and see what the problem is with kids, you know, and maybe, I don't know, adapt it in a way or fix it. Why not? That's a possibility. Another interesting fact, which was underlined in what I said before, as far as you get somewhere nearby who speaks for a young brain, that young brain will at one point speak. And why? Because one of the underlying principles of learning is imitation. We have this crusade in Chile, which I don't know if in Argentina you have issues like this, but what happens with many teachers in Latin America is that they are not teaching English in English. Have you seen or have you heard of that? Well, that's why. Does that happen sometimes? Teaching English, not in English?
Yes,
well,
mainly public schools.
In public schools, okay.
Schools.
Well, we have this crusade in Chile, which is called English in English. English in English. It's a crusade. It's like a motto. And we're trying to persuade teachers to teach English in English. And that is based on this learning principle. We learn through imitation. Okay? It's a biological principle. It's natural. If I ask you about your own children, if you are a mother or a father, yes, you would be, I know at times you are like surprised to see your kids talk like you. stand up like you, or even look at people like you, because they acquire your attitude. The human brain has an incredible capacity to imitate. You may have not taught it, but they are learning things they see in us. Yes? So this is a very powerful factor in language learning. Another interesting fact that is being studied, gender differences. There are differences. I know some people might want to throw me stones. This might not be a popular topic, but there are differences in the type of brains that we have. And until now, they have only discovered 2 types of brains. I should say it like this, okay, to sound as inclusive and accessible as possible. And that's why science is very quiet in this respect. There are only 2 brains, architecturally speaking, female and male. And apparently, there are a few slight differences in in how easy it becomes for one of the types of brains in relation to language processing. The female architecture type of brain seems to be or to have a slight advantage over the male brain. I'm not saying that this happens with everybody. There are always exceptions, okay? But apparently, science supports this thing. And I think there's one more. Written language doesn't come naturally. And it is said by educational neuroscientists that learning how to read and write is probably the most incredible challenge for the human brain. It's not standing and delivering. It's not talking at a TED talk. It's not going to the moon. Apparently, the most challenging intellectual activity is learning how to read and write. And why is that? Because there isn't a specific module within our brains that specializes in reading and writing. What the human brain did, probably a few thousand years in the past, the brain adapted and combined the skills of different modules in order for us to be able to read and write. Okay? This has a number of implications for those brains who have problems at the moment of, learning how to develop this skill. Or when we want a brain to become more skillful, say, move from initial to intermediate or therefore towards advanced. Okay? All right, I think I might, another phenomenon which is under study also at the moment is how learning 2 first languages may change the structure, the architecture of the brain. Okay? For some of us, I know you may have, I did, a grandmother who grew up in a subculture within Argentina, maybe Italian, or I don't know, Russian, and some of our grandparents grew up like having 2 first languages. If we had the chance to look at their brains, we might find a different architecture, okay? I had the chance to grow up next to a grandmother who was also from South Africa. In Patagonia, we had a colony of Afrikaners. So this is an interesting fact, okay? Learning 2 first languages gives that person a different architecture in the brain. Look at this. Monolingual versus a bilingual brain. There are differences. Okay? We have left, right, front, and back of the brain. So this is how a monolingual brain would be processing information by being 2 brains being exposed to the same type of phenomenon, a piece of news or a movie, etc. The way the bilingual brain processes is different from the way the monolingual brain processes the information. So what I'm saying here, learning a different language is always a benefit to the brain. And you might think, what's the news, Joaquin? But now we can prove it with science. And when these brains grow, when these brains become adults, the way they face the problems, the way they face thinking, whatever strategy will be different, because they have access to a different approach. They have access to different connectivities within their brains. Okay. Before I get to this, reactions, your questions. I hope any of these was appealing up to here.
No questions on the chat up to now. You can, as we are a few, you can make Joaquin the questions aloud. Turn on your mics.
Great.
And just ask.
Yes. Any questions or?
Yes, I was a
comments?
little. Hi, this is Sergio. And
yeah, Sergio.
Well, I was a little surprised about the fact that there are people who actually learn 2 first languages. When I was getting involved into English teaching, I always thought that there was only a first language, right? And even the cases of those, for example, kids in the United States whose parents are from any country in South America, and then they grew. I always thought, I had this idea that their first language is going to be only English, for the fact that they're exposed and their reality is only English language, and they're going to have Spanish as a secondary language. So I just wanted to know if that's the case of 2 first languages, or if there's any other case, because it was kind of new to me to know that there's a case of 2 first languages.
Yes, thank you, Sergio. Yeah, there is the phenomenon of full bilingualism and multilingualism as well. Okay, and that happens these days with children who, for example, learn the language of their parents at home, but on the street they speak another language. And it happens a lot with Spanish descendants in the States. It happens here in Chile as well. Now, in the new Chile, we have a lot of people speaking Creole at home. Creole is the language of the Haitians. But those little kids, the moment they go to the streets, the moment they go to school, and they start going to school now at the age of 3, they will be, that might probably be a first language as well. Whenever the brain is learning another language before the age of 7, that language has a high chance to become, like an option to the brain. And the brain is so malleable that it will take in that as a first language as well. I have my secretary here in the office, and we were discussing this the other day. She's from Venezuela. And she was telling me about his 4-year-old boy at home. He would speak with an accent, with a Venezuelan accent, with his sister and parents. But the moment he talks with neighbors, he immediately incorporates the Chilean jargon. Isn't that fascinating? So, of course, we should take this to the lab later and see, okay, now we'll check if he's behaving like a monolingual or a bilingual in the sense of Creole and Spanish, of course, not the sense of the Venezuelan, versus the Chilean standards. But that would be the case, Sergio, okay? A different scenario takes place with those of us who learned a second language later, okay? We might be proficient in the language, but the architecture of the brain is a bit different. Do we have the benefit of the bilingual brain? Yeah, we do. We might have the benefit of the bilingual brain, okay? But that would be a first and a second language, mostly. All right.
Thank you very much.
Vale has written, so illuminating. Now I want a webinar on each of the topics of the slide. There is the course, then we will tell you about it.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah. Let me be honest, be very transparent. I took several of the topics I just shared with you. I took them from a course we taught a couple of years ago. Because as I was preparing for this webinar, I said, man, I have only an hour and a half, and there are lots of things I want you to introduce, but at least I want you to, you know, take a zip of it and see how it feels, okay? And of course, we're always looking for teachers, for more teachers who want to become involved in this. There is a lot to do, a lot to read, and I'm sure with Andrea we'll be sharing, and with sharing materials, we'll be sharing more information about what's coming next in the near future, because this is only the beginning. This is only the beginning. There is an author, her name is Tracy Tokuhama Espinosa. I'm not sure if she's one of the slides that's coming next. Let me just stop sharing here, and I'll try to find her book.
Joaquín, while you look for it, there is
Yes.
another question. Bilingualism has to do with learning both of them simultaneously too, right?
Okay. Bilingualism, well, there is the phenomenon of early bilingualism and late bilingualism. Early bilingualism takes place for children and probably learning on a parallel. Remember this old question we had in the profesorados? I studied my profesorado in Argentina as well, so I can talk about profesorado too. Remember acquisition and learning? Or acquisition? Well, that's not the case anymore. So if you're teaching at university, remove those words. No more acquisition and learning. It's all learning. Yeah, it's all learning. And we should end up, you know, going to see what's going on in the brain of the person. But we talk about early bilingualism and late bilingualism. Late bilingualism may be taken like I take one language first and then I take the second. Okay, but how much that impacts the brain in the end, that is what we can consider by bilingualism in the end, or multilingualism. Okay, for example, there might be like some tips of a bilingual brain when you start dreaming in the other language. Has it ever happened to you? Like start dreaming? Or sometimes bilingual people resort to words from any of the languages to speak faster. Has that ever happened to you? My family at home, they tell me that, like, papá, ¿de qué te las das? It's not that I pretend anything. What does the bilingual brain do? Because bilingual brains are always looking, the brain is looking for economy. If it's faster, if it's shorter, if it's easier, I'll prefer it. Because our brains, we have this amount of energy if we want to use it, okay? And so, and it is happening these days with a lot of our young children who are what we call Generation Z, yeah? They grew up with the technology and they incorporate a lot of English words. Yes, does it happen with your students? Well, some people might want to sound snob, but for most of the brains, what happens is that they want to be economical. This is faster. It sounds better. It's a better choice. Yeah? All right. I think I got to the book I wanted to show you here because I don't want to get out of track. I know my time is not much. This is the author. Can you see the slide? Her name is Tracy Tokuhama Espinosa, and she wrote this book called Making Classrooms Better. This is her doctoral thesis because she's not originally from education, but she took her thesis in education and neuroscience. She has a doctoral studies in education and neuroscience, and she says in the introduction of her book that teachers from the 21st century will have to have one step on education, one step on education and neuroscience, and another step on psychology. Those are the 3 feet for teachers if we want to survive in the 21st century. The changes will be so dramatic and so fast that the only way we can adapt ourselves is by having this knowledge and trying to understand some of the phenomena behind this. In her thesis, she discusses, Tokuhama discusses 50 practical applications of mind, brain, and education science. This is another way to call educational neuroscience. Notice this: mind, brain, and education science. Okay, so they go by the acronym MBES sometimes. All right. Okay, so let's move on from here. I want to see where I want to continue. Oh, I had this other slide that I wanted to show you. And this is probably, since I was choosing what I wanted to show you, this is probably some of my favorite topics in educational neuroscience. Okay, this is probably, I was thinking today and I said, what do I want to share more personal? This is probably some of my favorite topics. By answering the question, how do we process information, is how I get to some of the topics that I feel would be of highest impact to teachers. Education and neuroscience deals with motivation. Okay, notice how important motivation is these days, since we're struggling with distance education. Yeah, so there's a lot there. What amount of motivation is intrinsic? What happens with extrinsic motivation? These days, the same thing is happening to you and to me today. Some of you confessed, I feel bewildered, I feel curious. Well, there was internal motivation that took you to this webinar today. Now, it's to my charge to see if I can maintain or increase that motivation. Yeah? So that's one of the issues that I like the most. And I think it will be very relevant during 2021, considering the context in which we have to educate these days. The other issue, which I think is crucial, notice how I'm completing here the process, the way we process information. The second one is attention. We are in the pandemic today of attention deficit, aren't we? That pandemic was previous to COVID-19. Apparently, every child suffers from ADHD these days. Yeah, and that has to do with a number of circumstances, but neuroscience can enlighten the way in this area. Okay, how much of this requires medication? How much of this can be impacted from changes in the classroom, changes of life habits at home, etc., etc. Now, the other 3, I think, are very, very new to us as teachers, but as important as motivation and attention. Sensory register has to do with, you may have heard of this concept. There are some coffee shops, at least here in Santiago, who are not only interested in giving you good coffee, but in offering you an experience. Have you ever heard of that? Well, this is interesting. Oh, I want an experience. When you go to a restaurant, neuroscience has discovered that you're not only going for the food, you go for the experience. Have you heard of that? Well, interesting, but give a second thought to it. Why have you chosen in the past this restaurant instead of this other one? Maybe to the same type of delivery, I choose this one. Why? Because there are a number of factors that give me a different experience. And experience has to do with sensory register. What I touch, what I smell, what I see, what I hear, my senses. Yeah? This is all a new area for us. And this explains some of the reasons why you preferred some of your teachers in school. If you think of school, go back to school, your years at school when you were a student. Can you remember the name of a teacher who you preferred, who you liked? And sometimes I can think of Nelly de Vadillo, my third grade teacher, second grade and third grade teacher. She was my language teacher. And I think of Nelly back in time, like 40 something years back in time. And I think it wasn't something specific about her, but a number of things. She created an experience, an ideal experience for me. So sensory register is important. Two other topics that I think are important in relation to the way we process information is the way we remember things in the short term and the way we remember in the long-term memory. And let's make a quick difference here. When we talk about short-term memory, I'm referring to all experiences from now until the next 48 hours. That is more or less short-term memory. So if you met a student today, you taught a great class on adjectives, I don't know, or talking about cars, and you meet that student after 24 or 48 hours, we have to start talking about long-term memory, okay? So as to make a difference. Now, which of the two, short-term or long-term, which of the two do you think is more volatile and fragile? Like, oops, I forgot. What do you think? Actually not, short-term. We tend to forget. Yeah, a lot of the things that I have shared with you today, you will forget. You will stick only to a few of them because your short-term is more volatile. So there are a number of strategies a teacher should use in order to make that memory stronger. Because if I make short-term memory stronger, as a consequence, I start making long-term memory more powerful. Yeah? Well, so on and so forth. So do you think these 5 topics might be relevant for someone who's teaching? Definitely yes. That's why I chose it as my favorite topics I wanted to share with you today. Well, sharing materials has already envisioned and planned for a course on an introductory course to education and neuroscience. Some of these topics will be tackling in the 8 different sessions that we have designed for the course that will be being delivered by sharing materials and with sharing materials. But this is interesting. This is interesting. A lot of us teachers, because science hasn't been closed to educational practices, we have focused a lot on tests. In a way, a test is some stressful form of empowering or measuring long-term memory. But a test is not a strategy to make memory stronger. So I think in the next 5-10 years, if you are teaching at a profesorado, if you are planning to take on, I don't know, special studies, prosecute other studies, I think you should definitely give some of your attention to empowering short-term memory and long-term memory, okay? All right. Now, from here, I would like to move on to another, any reactions to this, questions? Andrea, you might want to help me there in the chat.
Yes, well, no wonder our students do not remember anything we taught the previous class, Patricia. And my question, a personal question, I have a short-term memory. For example, if I have to prepare for a final exam, I cannot prepare for it for a month. I have to stay 2 days before. If the subject is very long, maybe 7 days before. If not, I forget everything. Are there any exercises that we can do to improve that?
Okay. Well, number one, I should say this. Everybody has both short-term memory and long-term memory. But because sometimes short-term memory has to do memory has to do with immediate things. You tend to become more stressed about that task. And remember, and this is something we're going to deal with in a few minutes, the emotional system in the brain prepares you for the cognitive system to act. So if I'm stressed, if I need to take this exam and not fail it, then there's a lot of emotion implied in it. You know, neuroscientists haven't made up their minds yet up to whether we are a species that first felt and then learned how to think, or first thought and then learned how to feel. Yeah, and I have the tendency towards the first one. I think we are a species that has learned to feel first, and then we learn how to think. So the memory formation process is amazing. Is amazing. Let me give you a couple of tips. Two of the things that are very much connected to memory formation have to do with self-perception. Self-perception. Do you perceive yourself as someone capable of doing this? Then that will directly impact your memory formation. We may have heard in the past that what the teacher says is important to the student. It's not only important, it's critical. Yes? You may remember a teacher from your high school. I may remember Sam, like, ustedes no son capaces de hacer esto. Remember the old school? Well, that may have impacted someone really hard because self-perception is dramatic for memory formation. And the other one, which is very much connected, self-perception, has to do with self-esteem. Some people think that self-esteem comes first, but today I'm changing the order, okay? If you allow me, I know it's difficult to change that, but we say, hey, help his self-esteem. Teachers in general do not help directly the self-esteem. We help self-perception. What I think of myself will, as a consequence, impact what I feel about myself. Yeah? Well, I need to stop there with memory formation. There are several tips in the course that Sharon will be delivering, but I think it's critical, it's crucial for teachers because that will help us change our practices, the way we act in class, what we do, what we say, etc., etc. All right. So 3 of the books I wanted to suggest in case you want to get deeper into this are Making Classrooms Better by Tracy Tokuhama Espinosa. Can you see her name? Tokuhama. She's American, Japanese, Ecuadorian. As everybody today, nobody is exactly from one place. Tracy Tokuhama Espinosa. She's a multilingual person. Her book is only in English, unfortunately. But I know I'm talking to the right people here. Yeah, I'm talking to the right people. The other author that is also, well, actually it's my Bible, not this book, but the author, David Sousa. He wrote several books, and one of his books for the audience I'm with today is How the ELL Brain Learns. Okay, and that's really to the point in terms of second language learning. Okay, second language learning. And one more I wanted to suggest, which is not directly related to language learning, but to education practices, visible learning for teachers, maximizing impact on learning. John Hattie, I think he's Australian. He's been studying for the last 20 years on statistical analysis, the 100 characteristics, the 100 practices that may impact your students more. For example, you may have a question. Teaching in a religious environment, does it impact the brain for learning? Well, go read John Hattie. Or having a family that makes the student do the homework at home, does it impact the brain? You can read Hattie, because what he did was ranking the top 100, the top 50, the top 20, the top 5 features that may help learners impact the learning. I think it's a great reading. Okay, all right. I've got to start rushing because I think I have only like 20 more minutes. This is something I'm not going to play now. I hope I have captured your attention. I'm not going to play it now, but I'll leave it there for you to access later. And it talks about the times we're living these days. We are probably in one of the most transformational times of human history, my dear. And that's why basically the reason why we teachers need to get, into this new area. Okay? Because sometimes it may have happened to you last year, and it might be happening to you this year. Like, how can I impact the brain of my students? How can I attract their attention? How can I, etc.? A lot of questions you may have. So this video, I'll leave it there, okay? For you to see. Briefly, I want to mention, we won't have time to cover this in depth, but this is one of the typical slides I go through with participants in our programs. And we basically explained that there are a number of features that we need to understand when entering educational neuroscience. Biology and the architecture of the brain is important, but it's not an end in itself, okay? Especially for that one in the group who said, I feel bewildered. Well, good news. You don't need to focus on biology itself. You have to go to the principles behind it. We'll go there in a couple of minutes. But I basically want to say a few things that are important. Our brain is designed in what we call 3 systems in one. In a few minutes, we'll discuss that. There are 3 systems that are operating on a parallel basis, and that's why the 3 in 1. Neuron is basically the minimum unit of study in our nervous system, okay? And I know these words are very similar in Spanish, so for us who are Spanish-English bilingual, it helps a lot. And this is interesting. Neurons have a specific behavior. And because of that behavior, we can then conclude different teaching principles, okay? Different teaching principles. Let me just explain a couple of those behaviors of the neurons. 10,000. You know what 10,000 is? It's the potential connectivity of one neuron with other neurons. One single neuron can connect with up to 10,000 neurons. That's the potential connectivity of one neuron. What does that say to us? Well, it simply says that we have a limited number of neurons available. Actually, it goes there like 20 million in the brain, basically. 20,000 billion, sorry. But that 20,000 million has to be multiplied by 10,000 because that's the potential connectivity of one single neuron. Another implication might be that one group of neurons may be used At one time for the language. At another time, I can use it to play music. At another time, I can use it to ride my car, etc., etc. Okay, a number of implications there. Oh, and one implication from this that I love is that the human brain is a natural novelty seeker. I'll say that again. The human brain is a natural novelty seeker. Novelty meaning we understand novelty, right? Novedad. We are naturally curious. Actually, 3 in the group today at the beginning used the word curious. And I know you as a teacher or as a parent or as an aunt or as an uncle have used the curiosity of other brains to start a lesson. So notice how does Joaquín go there? Well, because I'm connecting the word neuron to this natural capacity. Neurons do not work in isolation. They work as a team. They are designed to operate in teams. So they make up modules, they make up lobes. Okay, we have the frontal lobe somewhere here, and that is made up of neurons that are tightly connected, right? So those are some of the implications, and those are some of the fascinations we can develop with neuroscience. 24. Who would like to guess? 24. Come on. 24. What does 24 go for? I have 2 answers.
24 hours a day.
Thank you. That was my first answer. The brain works 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
But a word of caution there. A word of caution. It doesn't mean that it works in the same mode. Yes, mm-hmm. Even though it works 24/7, 1/3 of its time, as it says below, the brain needs to be in sleeping mode. Okay? Yeah, great. What's the other 24? Who wants to give me the other 24?
2 for 4 millimeters.
24? No.
No?
Nope, no. Okay, no. 24 is the average age in a human being at which science considers the brain becomes mature.
Mm-hmm.
24.
There was no
Isn't
way
that...
we guessed that.
Excuse me? No,
there
no
was
way.
No way we could have guessed that.
Right. Notice something. Remember I said at the beginning that this science is changing all the time. This slide is probably from 2 or 3 years in the past. I should probably change it now because the most accepted tendency now is around 30. Around 30. It's because science has discovered that the most complicated machine in our body, the brain, keeps moving and keeps growing in time. And there are specific functions in a brain, like the capacity to plan for my life, the capacity to control time, the capacity to shut down when I don't have to talk, which is self-monitoring. Those, we call those, in Spanish, we call them funciones ejecutivas, executive functioning skills. Mm-hmm. Those executive functioning skills keep growing until more or less the age of 24. Isn't this something for education? When we expect from a 18-year-old girl to make up decisions like, what are you going to study at university? Well, probably not now, but in the past, who are you going to marry? They wouldn't know because brains are still in process. So 2 of the things I usually tell teachers, implying from here, from this discovery, is number 1, keep as close to your teens as long as possible. If you have a son, a daughter, or students at university, we have to keep close to them, become their advisors. They really need us because they are brains in process. And if we have young people around who are having a hard time to make up their minds, well, it's reasonable their brains might not be that ready yet. Okay? Okay. You stop me when you feel I need to stop, okay, Andrea? Because I may move on from here. Okay, one more from here, one more, and then I'll just jump into the 3-in-1 I promised. Neurons, I said, have been designed to communicate. They cannot operate in isolation. And I usually say, if neurons do this, teachers should do the same. We should always work in teams. Yeah, it's the most intelligent way to work. But in order to work in a team, we need to communicate. Neurons need to communicate with one another. What is the language they use to communicate? Well, it's an electrobiochemical type of language. It's through electrobiochemical changes within their internal characteristics that they communicate with each other. What's the name of the languages? Anybody knows? If I mention one example, serotonin.
Impulses.
Okay, we call serotonin, adrenaline.
Microtransmisores in Spanish, but I don't know the name in
Okay,
English. Is that all right?
we call them neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters. Yeah, thank you. Neurotransmitters, yeah? Why are these important? Why is Joaquin talking to me about this? Man, I'm a language teacher. Well, you know why I'm telling you this? Because it's all produced, all these biochemical changes are produced depending on the interpretation of your brain of what's going on around. What Andrea was just saying, oh, short memory is good with me because when I need to prepare for an exam, it's your adrenaline, Andrea, that activates your capacity to remember information. We are a factory of biochemical elements. So when a teacher comes in and says, hi, everybody, good to have you back, and a smile, I'm trying to make some effects on my students, which, you know, makes their brain interpret. Ah, llegó la de inglés, pero buena onda. Okay? I'm trying to put it in simple words. Ah, no entiendo ni jota, pero dale, que tira para arriba. Yes? Electrobiochemical changes. That's the language of neurons. And that's why whenever there are crises in a group, yes, you may have been in a group where there is a crisis, there is a problem, there is some kind of issue. No, queremos que venga la Miss Fabiola. Con ella sí hablamos. Why does that happen? Because probably Miss Fabiola intuitively or in some way, she has broken through those brains and produces, you know, this effect in them. Okay? That's why I'm talking about neurotransmitters. There are about 50 neurotransmitters that have been identified by science. This is today. Probably in 5 years, I'll tell you more. Some of them, the most popular for education, serotonin, oxytocin, dopamine. Those three are very, very important. Serotonin, oxytocin, dopamine, and some adrenaline. Some adrenaline. Adrenaline is the previous element of stress. You know it. I'm not telling you anything new. Adrenaline is the precursor of stress. Is stress to some extent good? Yes, sir. Yes, madam. Our adolescents, our children need some level of stress sometimes. And this is one of the things I'm defending here in Chile. My son is in a school where everything was relaxed, everything was adapted towards the benefit of the students. But sometimes I talk to my son's teacher and say, hey, my son needs a bit of pressure. Otherwise, many children, when they are not pressured by anybody, they melt down like jelly. Jelly out of the fridge. Have you seen how sad that is after 4 or 5 hours? So we have to be cautious there. We have to, keep that in control. Okay? All right. A few more minutes. I don't have time to. A few more minutes just to briefly introduce the 3-in-1. What is the 3-in-1? Our brain, your student's brain, and my brain operate like this. Whenever there is a new element coming in our brain, like hello, saying hello is a stimulus, yes, and we react. The first system that takes that information is the instinctive system. It's the most basic system. It's the system, for example, that is not allowing Pat was telling us at the beginning, oh, it's hot here in Rosario. Well, probably Pat's brain is fighting the heat to concentrate in the session. Because first is survival. Yes? My chair where I'm sitting is noisy and moving a lot. So Joaquín is a bit like, oh, I'm going to fall in the middle of the talk. So I'm fighting that. There might be other elements you're fighting. That has to do with the instinctive system. System number 2. Yeah, sorry?
Sorry, no, I remember I read something about fight or flee system.
Yes, the fight or exactly, the fight or flee, exactly. That is very instinctive. Yeah, very instinctive. Thank you for the comment. The second system, the emotional system, that's the one that comes after the instinctive one. Okay, and that has to do with the emotions I'm feeling right now. I need to monitor, administer them. The emotions that you wake up in me. Remember, I've said that before. What does the teacher, causes? What does the teacher cause in the student brain? And this all has to do with interpretations. Our brain is a big interpreter. Susana is here. Pedro is here. Same class. Well, in this case, 2 different screens, but with the same teacher. But Susana interprets one thing from your class, Pedro interprets something different. Emotional systems. What is that based on? Self-perception, self-esteem. Okay? We say here, cuento. ¿Qué cuento tiene cada uno? What's the story behind each of them? Very important. And system number 3, cognitive executive system. This is like the front part of the brain. Yeah, it's the brain looking like this. So the cognitive executive system is located in the prefrontal lobe, okay? And it includes the cognitive executive functions. My capacity to moderate myself, my capacity to organize my time, etc., etc. Okay? Does this make sense to you? Yep, great. Well, I'll move on. Andrea, you just let me know when I have to stop. I can get deeper now into each of the 3 systems, 2 or 3 ideas for us to tackle this in our own lives and with our students. Notice,
sorry
for
interrupting you. You can take 5 more minutes or 10 if you would like to, because we have a delay for entering the room, so no problem.
Okay, great. Okay, I'll take neither 5 nor 10, I'll take 7. Just let me know, okay? Notice this arrow here, which is coming up. What is that? Showing the direction in which a stimulus goes within the brain, okay? This is the way we process it. Now, notice something. Which do you think of these 3 is the most basic? The instinctive, right? The instinctive one. And that's why it's important whenever I get a stimulus, like someone stepping on my foot. Has that ever happened to you? Someone stepping on your foot? You may have seen different types of reactions. Someone wanting to kick you, or someone shouting, or someone saying, hey, what makes the difference between all of them? Some of those brains would give the stimulus enough time to go up to the cognitive executive brain. Some people react immediately, don't give time to process the stimulus. Yes, and they just react. Some others give it time and it goes up to the emotional system, and some people would think about it and react according to that. Can you see now the key to the importance of taking time to react, taking time to process, and of course, giving that brain the chance to educate itself? Now, that takes us to another question. Are the three systems potentially, can they be taken through education? Can we educate the three systems? Not really.
Not the basic one.
Not the basic one. And the second one, the emotional system, we can model it, train it, but not educate it. The only one we can educate really is the cognitive executive brain. You may have heard of this in the past. Education is the only way to change your future. Education is the only way to change a person. Neuroscience says, thumbs up, you are correct. Because if that yellow arrow goes up, showing the direction in which a stimulus comes in, I should have another arrow in another color showing that the answer to that stimulus comes or should come from the cognitive executive system. My response to that, you stepping accidentally on my foot, my response to whatever crisis, my response to my critical situation, the response in the classroom, ideally should start at the cognitive executive system. If that person has been educated, there are more options to answer. Wow, man, I've put an entire course into 1 hour, webinar. But and that's why we should study how to control the instinctive system, how to train the emotional system, how to educate the cognitive executive system. Those are questions that education and neuroscience wants to help us answer. Okay, so I've already mentioned the three, and I will just leave for you. I will just leave this in the slides, and Andrea, the slides will be shared with the people. Yeah, so you can easily go through them, because I've included a number of suggestions. Number one, I have paralleled each of the systems to one type of species on Earth. I have paralleled the instinctive system to that of reptilians, okay? Why? Because, well, this type of animals cannot be trained. If you have ever seen a turtle or a lizard that has been trained, please introduce it to me, because there are none in general, and we cannot train it. We just have to take care of it. I will be leaving a few tips for you to read through later on. I don't want to just read all of this information for you now, but you can thoroughly go through the different elements, okay? But it has to do with the instinctive system. Then, speaking of the emotional system, where our emotions are raised, that light blue element there is called the amygdala, the factory of the emotions. You know what they discovered only about 20, 30 years ago? That the factory of the emotions, the amygdala, is very near another structure which has to do with the creation of memories. Yes? So it's very, very interesting, very interesting. So what is the main difference between a mammal and a reptile? I'm putting there a mammal because we share with mammals the emotional system. Mammals have memories, and therefore they can be trained. We can train a mammal, a horse, a cat, a dog, because they have emotions, and therefore they have memories. So you see how intricate the relationship between feelings and thought. in a way, because if we don't have a memory, how can we create thoughts the way we think? I've also included a few tips to train the emotional brain, the emotional system, for you to check later, okay? I don't want to rush through the contents right now because it's like pushing a lot of stuff for you that is not really necessary. Last but not least, the grayish, whitish type of matter, soft matter in our brains, which is called the cognitive executive brain. It has specific, amazing characteristics. It's the last part of the brain that becomes mature. And good news, it's the one we can educate. Yes, we can self-educate and we can educate other brains. Okay, that's why we say education and neuroscience have to go hand in hand in this century. I've also included a few tips for you to use. And I know behind these tips, you will discover several methodologies that are being at play these days. Okay, so different things for you to go through there. Well, we don't have much time left, but one idea you can follow right now, if you have 1 minute, please jot down the following, what we call the 3 whats. Could you just jot down one word that reflects on what you knew before this workshop? 1 word or 2 words, something you knew about the topic before the workshop. Number 2, 1 or 2 words about what you learned today. And number 3, 1 or 2 words about something you want to get deeper information about, something that is still missing for you. I'll say that again. This is what we call the 3 whats technique. 2 words about what you knew from before. Number 2, 2 words about what you learned today. And number 3, a couple of words to show what is still missing, something you still want to learn about this topic. And then if you're ready, someone who can share with us. I'd like to hear about number 2, what you learned today. 2 words that reflect on what you learned today.
For example, Valeria, I knew about brain structure. Number 2, I learned about emotions and memories. Number 3, I like to go deeper into attention and memory. Me too. Number 3, Marcela, I would like to go deeper, love neurosciences. No other comments here. Well,
okay.
Marce also, that is
yeah,
new.
I also included number 1 and number 2 above.
I was going to read it.
I knew about the amygdala. I knew about it. I didn't know that. I learned that it was connected, and it was near an area connected with a memory. Well, and I would like to go deeper into all these topics. They are great.
Great. Thank you for sharing. All right. Someone else who would like to share through the mic?
Okay, I was typing. I can tell you. What I knew was about the 3 systems. What I learned, because I'm very interested in emotions, so what impacted me was the fact that, well, emotions are impacted by self-perception and self-esteem. I think it's very valuable for what I'm studying. And what I want to know more is perhaps about attention. Yes, attention span, short-term and long-term memory.
Thank you very much. Somebody else?
Well, yes, me too. I can comment that I knew about gender differences on regards to speaking, and what I learned was what I really didn't know was this about self-perception and how it impacts on memory formation. I had no idea about that. And what I would like to have more information about is empowering memory tips.
Empowering memory tips. Great, great. Yeah, yeah, I understand. Well, yeah, great. Thank you. Anybody else?
No more questions? No more. They are shy today.
They are shy. It's okay. It's okay. Just remember, the more I write, the more I talk, the more I learn. Yes? That's why in our classrooms, in our classes in general, well, today's session was not an ideal one because I did a lot of the talking. But this is a good idea, a good technique to, summarize, to put things in simple, and to express myself. Because that way I can retain information better. We have Norma says, yeah, the 3 systems. Number 1, what she knew about it. Number 2, the importance of self-perception. Good. And number 3, go deeper through number 2. The importance of self-perception. Good. All right. Let me say this. Very interesting. Last November, we had the first brain-based conference on TEFL teaching to very young learners here in Chile. And one of the things that called the attention most among teachers was this concept of self-perception, self-esteem. So I think we have to this is giving me a sign that we need to go deeper. And let me just give you an idea. There is an entire program, an entire system that goes into this. It's by Caroline Deck. Caroline Deck. She deals with the
power.
The mind growth mindset. Fixed versus growth. Yes,
growth mindset.
Yes,
Carol
yes.
Dweck.
Exactly. Yes. Well, that system is based on this phenomenon. So I think I suggest to go deeper there. Okay, go deeper there. All right. Okay. Yeah, Carol Dweck. Thank you. You see, I'm just coming back from vacation. I have an invitation. I know I'm just now giving space for sharing materials. Andrea will be introducing some things, but I know I have just 1 minute to briefly let you know that as of tomorrow, I'm starting with this new podcast series. It's a podcast series with a funny name, Cerebro con Ketchup. I don't know about our young Argentinians, but young Chileans eat everything with ketchup. I don't know if that's the case there, but here everything is with ketchup. So that's why I thought of this name, Cerebro con Ketchup, and it's starting tomorrow. So you can find myself and find Comunidad Neuroeducas in our different social media. It starts tomorrow. It's a podcast. That means just listening. All right. Other than that, our task is to help children climb their own mountains as high as possible, but no one can do more. Okay? Thank you very much for the most precious thing you have these days, your attention and your time. That's the most precious thing. All right.
Thank you very much. Well, if you stop sharing your screen, I can finish today's webinar. Congratulations, you gave a very nice talk, very interesting. Well, I will do what I usually do. Tell me when you see my screen.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, we're going to make the raffle of our gifts as usual. The first prize is a free pack, New Voices, clear plus local culture content equal a perfect match by Jorgelina Carlazare. And there are 2 more prizes, number 2 and number 3, 2 packs of worksheets by Useful Printable Worksheets. So we are rush. Go here. The first prize goes to Virginia Tomás. and the 2 useful printable worksheets. There are 2 packs each. Another time, Virginia. Okay, doesn't matter. You got the 2, and I will make 2 more.
I'm really lucky today.
Patricia Sorio, number 2.
Hi.
And Soledad Iriarte. Okay, so Virginia Tomas, you got the 2 prizes, the
Right.
worksheets and all the free pass, and Patricia and Soledad, the other one, yes, the 2 packs. Well, you can...
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have to stop sharing now. Okay. Here. If you would like to, before we leave, we can... I cannot find how to stop sharing. We can smile in order to take a picture before we leave. Wait a minute. Okay. Am I there? Yes, here I am. Okay. For coming, Joaquín, my pleasure. It was very nice to have you here, and all of you. Hope to see you in following webinars. I will share with you some links in order to have your opinions in our fan pages at Facebook, on Facebook, and well, all the links to the materials and certificates, and of course the event handout as well. Well, thank you very much to all of you. Bye bye.